I never thought I'd end up in a courtroom facing my own brother. But there I was, sitting on the opposite side of the room while he stared at me with a hatred I'd never seen in his eyes before. And when the judge pressed that button to play the audio, everything changed. My entire life turned upside down in a matter of seconds. But before we get to that moment, you need to understand how it all started. If you love real stories about insane courtroom twists, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell because this story is going to leave your jaw on the floor until the very last second. And I guarantee you're going to want to watch until the end, because the twist that happened in that courtroom was something nobody expected. My name is Daniel. I'm 32 years old, and for my entire life, my older brother Marcus was my best friend. We grew up in a typical middle-class family in a small town in Ohio. Our dad, Robert, worked his whole life as an accountant, and our mom, Linda, was an elementary school teacher. They raised us with solid values, always emphasizing the importance of family and honesty. Everything started falling apart 3 years ago when our mom suddenly passed away from a brain aneurysm. She was only 58. It was devastating for all of us, but especially for Dad. They'd been married for 35 years, and watching him lose the love of his life was heartbreaking. Marcus and I did our best to support him, taking turns visiting, making sure he wasn't alone for too long. I was single at the time, working as a freelance graphic designer, so I had more flexibility with my schedule. Marcus was married to Sarah, had 2 young kids, and worked as a manager at a logistics company. Because of my flexibility, I ended up spending more time with Dad. We started having our rituals, watching baseball games together, playing chess, just talking about life. It was during one of those conversations, about 6 months after Mom died, that my father mentioned something about changing his will. He said he wanted to make sure everything was in order in case something happened to him. I didn't think much of it at the time. Figured he was just being practical, getting things sorted after losing Mom. But then Sarah, Marcus's wife, started making strange comments. During a family dinner, she casually mentioned that I was spending too much time with Dad. At first, I thought she was just making an innocent observation, but the way she said it, with that slightly accusatory tone, bothered me. Things escalated quickly after that. Marcus started getting distant, responding to my texts with short answers, making excuses not to meet up. I didn't understand what was happening. I tried talking to him several times, but he always deflected, said he was busy with work and family. Then came the day that changed everything. My father had a massive heart attack while he was at home. I'd spent the afternoon with him, and after I left, about 2 hours later, he called 911. The paramedics got there in time, and he was rushed to the hospital. I got the call from the hospital and raced over. Marcus arrived half an hour later. Dad survived, thank God, but the doctors said the damage to his heart was significant. He'd need constant care, lifestyle changes, strict medication. He was only 63, but suddenly he seemed so much older, so much more fragile. During the weeks of recovery in the hospital, I continued visiting him every day. Marcus came too, but I could feel a growing tension between us. Sarah barely showed up, always sending excuses about the kids, about work. But the truth is, I felt something strange in the air, like there were conversations happening behind my back. 3 months after the heart attack, my father passed away. It was peaceful, in his sleep. I was devastated. Losing my mother had already been horrible, but losing my father so soon after seemed too cruel. Marcus and I organized the funeral together, and during those days, it seemed like our old connection was coming back. We hugged, cried together, reminisced about stories of our parents. But that only lasted until the reading of the will. My father's attorney, Mr. Harrison, called us to his office a week after the funeral. Me, Marcus, and Sarah sat in his conference room while he opened the envelope. I expected everything to be split equally between Marcus and me, as it had always been our parents' plan. The family house, the savings, the investments, everything 50-50. But that's not what happened. Mr. Harrison read the will out loud, and with each word, I could see Marcus's face getting redder and redder. My father had left the family house to me, the house where we grew up, valued at about $450,000. Marcus would receive half of the savings and investments, which totaled about $200,000. I would receive the other half, plus the house. There was a deafening silence in the room. I was in shock. I looked at Marcus, and the expression on his face was pure betrayal. Sarah was pale, but her eyes gleamed with something that looked like rage. Marcus finally spoke, his voice trembling. "This isn't right. Dad would never do this. It was always supposed to be split equally between us." I tried to respond, but Sarah cut me off. "You did this, didn't you? You took advantage of being alone with him, that he was weak and sick, and you manipulated him." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What? No! I didn't do any of that. I didn't even know about this." Mr. Harrison tried to calm the situation, explaining that my father had changed the will 6 months prior, that he was in perfect mental capacity, that everything was done legally. But Marcus and Sarah didn't want to hear it. They walked out of the office, and that was the last time my brother spoke to me civilly. In the following weeks, I tried calling, texting, even went to his house. But Marcus didn't want to hear me out. Sarah would answer the door and tell me I wasn't welcome. I was losing my brother over money, and it was destroying me inside. Then, 2 months later, I received the notification. Marcus was suing me, contesting the will. The allegation was undue influence, that I had manipulated our father during a period of vulnerability, that he wasn't in proper mental capacity when he changed the will. I was devastated. Not just because of the accusation, but because it meant my brother truly believed I was capable of something like that. Or worse, he knew it wasn't true, but was doing it anyway out of greed. I hired a lawyer, Dr. Peters, an older man with decades of experience in estate disputes. He reviewed everything and told me their case was weak, that my father had medical documentation showing mental capacity, that his attorney could testify about Dad's mental state at the time of the will change. But still, the case went to trial. The months leading up to the trial were hell. I could barely work, could barely sleep. I had lost my parents, and now I was losing my brother. The pain was unbearable. There were moments when I thought about just giving up, giving him the damn house, just to have my brother back. But Dr. Peters told me it wasn't about the money. It was about principle, about respecting my father's wishes. And he was right. My father had made that choice for a reason, and I needed to honor it, even if I didn't fully understand why. The trial started on a cold Monday in October. I sat on my side of the courtroom with Dr. Peters, and Marcus was on the other side with Sarah and their attorney, a sharp woman named Ms. Chen. The judge was a middle-aged man named Judge Thornton, known for being fair but strict. The first few days were torturous. Ms. Chen painted a picture of me as a calculating son who took advantage of his father's vulnerability after his mother's death. They brought witnesses, neighbors who said they saw me at Dad's house frequently, a former co-worker of Dad's who said he seemed different in his last months. But the worst part was when Marcus took the witness stand, my own brother, who I'd shared a bedroom with throughout childhood, who I'd played ball with in the backyard, who I'd dreamed about the future with, sat there and said under oath that he believed I had manipulated our father. His words were like knives. He described how I isolated Dad, how I spent excessive time with him, how I excluded Marcus from Dad's life. None of it was true. Marcus was busy. He had his family, his work. I was available, so I was there. It was that simple. When it was my turn to testify, I told the truth. I explained that I loved my father, that I spent time with him because he was alone and grieving. I explained that never, not once, did I talk about his will beyond that single mention he made. I said I had no idea he'd left me the house until the reading of the will. Dr. Peters presented all the documentation, medical evaluations showing Dad was lucid and capable. Mr. Harrison's testimony confirming that Dad was clear about his intentions, that he was acting of his own free will. Testimonies from Dad's friends saying he frequently talked about how grateful he was that I was there for him. But Ms. Chen was good. She planted seeds of doubt, questioned every witness, suggested alternative motives. The case was balanced, and I honestly didn't know which way it would go. Then came the crucial moment, the one I'll never forget. It was the last day of the trial. Both sides had already presented their closing arguments. Judge Thornton was about to give his instructions to the jury when Ms. Chen asked to call one more witness, Sarah. She hadn't testified yet, and Dr. Peters and I exchanged confused glances about what she could add. Sarah took the stand, took the oath, and began testifying. She talked about the change in my behavior after Mom's death, how I was suddenly always with Dad. She was painting the picture of long-term planning on my part. But then Dr. Peters started cross-examination, and that's when things got interesting. "Mrs. Sarah, did you visit your father-in-law regularly after your mother-in-law's death?" he asked. "When I could, yes," she replied. "How often would that be?" "Look, I had 2 young kids, work, responsibilities. Please answer the question. How often?" "Maybe once a month, sometimes less." "And did you call him regularly?" Sarah hesitated. "Occasionally." "Occasionally. And were you aware that your father-in-law was lonely and grieving?" "Of course. But Daniel was always there, so you assumed Daniel would take care of him." "Objection." Ms. Chen stood up. "Sustained," said Judge Thornton. Dr. Peters changed tactics. "Mrs. Sarah, have you ever discussed with your husband the potential inheritance from your father-in-law?" Sarah went pale. Everyone thinks about these things. Is that a yes?" "We talked about the future, about making sure our kids were secure. And you expected the inheritance to be split equally?" "Well, yes, it was only fair." "And when you found out the house was left to Daniel, how did you feel?" "Betrayed. Hurt. It was obvious what he'd done." "Obvious? Did you have any proof of manipulation?" "I didn't need proof. It was obvious." That's when it happened. Marcus, who was sitting in the gallery, suddenly stood up and screamed, "He's lying! My father told me! He told me Daniel was pressuring him!" The courtroom erupted. Judge Thornton banged his gavel. "Order! Order in the court!" But Marcus continued. "There's a recording. Dad called me. He told me he was confused, that Daniel was always talking about the future, about what to do with the house." My heart stopped. A recording? What was he talking about? I never did any of that. "Doctor," Peters looked at me, and I shook my head vigorously. It wasn't true. None of it was true. Judge Thornton ordered Marcus to calm down or be removed. Ms. Chen asked for a recess to consult with her client. The judge granted 15 minutes. During the recess, Dr. Peters asked me directly, "Is there any possibility of a recording of you discussing inheritance with your father?" "No," I said emphatically. "Never. Not once did I discuss that with him beyond that first time he mentioned it, and I just listened." When we returned, Ms. Chen announced she had additional evidence she'd like to present, an audio recording of a phone conversation between Robert and Marcus, dated about 4 months before Robert's death. Judge Thornton allowed it, though Dr. Peters protested it was too late to introduce new evidence. But the curiosity was too great, and the judge wanted to hear it. The courtroom fell into absolute silence as Ms. Chen connected her laptop to the courtroom sound system. I could hear my own heart pounding. If there really was a recording of me pressuring my father, I was finished. But I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. So what was Marcus talking about? The audio started playing. It was my father's voice, unmistakably, though it sounded tired and a bit weak. "Marcus? Is that you, son?" "Yes, Dad, it's me. How are you feeling?" "Tired. Always tired these days. But I'm okay. Dad, I needed to talk to you about something. Sarah and I were talking, and we were thinking, well, with everything that's happened, with your health, we think you should consider letting us have the family house." There was a pause. I leaned forward, my heart racing. "Marcus, we've already talked about this." "I know, Dad, but think about it. We have the grandkids, they'd love to grow up in that house, just like we did. Daniel is single. He doesn't need all that space. We could take care of you there. You could stay with us." "Marcus, I've already made my decision about the will." "But Dad, it's not fair. Daniel already spends all that time with you. He's probably already in your head about all of this." "Daniel has never mentioned anything about the will, Marcus, not once." "Then why would you change things? It was always supposed to be split equally." "Because Daniel was here, Marcus. When your mother died, when I needed someone most, Daniel was here. He put aside his life, his work, his relationships to take care of me. And you showed up when it was convenient." "That's not fair, Dad. I have a family, Responsibilities. And I understand that, son. But Daniel had responsibilities too, and he chose to be here for me. The house is going to him because he earned it, not through manipulation, but through genuine love and sacrifice. And I need you to respect my decision. Dad. Marcus, I love you. But my decision is made. And I'm recording this conversation because Sarah has been calling me every week with the same conversation. And I'm tired of it. I'm sending a copy to Mr. Harrison too, in case there's any dispute after I'm gone. The audio stopped. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. I was in complete shock. I had no idea Sarah had been pressuring my father. Had no idea Marcus had made that appeal. And I certainly had no idea my father had recorded the conversation. I looked across the courtroom. Marcus was pale, his hands shaking. Sarah had tears streaming down her face, but not from sadness, from humiliation and anger. Judge Thornton broke the silence. Ms. Chen, I'm confused. Why would the plaintiff present evidence that clearly contradicts their own allegation? Ms. Chen was visibly shaken. Your Honor, my client informed me there was a recording that would prove undue influence by the defendant. I had not heard the recording prior to this moment. I apologized to the court. Judge Thornton looked at Marcus with disapproval. Mr. Marcus, did you present false evidence to your own attorney? Marcus couldn't speak. Sarah started crying harder. The judge continued. It's clear to this court that not only was there no undue influence by the defendant, Daniel, but that in fact there were attempts at undue influence of the late Robert by his other son and daughter-in-law, attempts which Robert consciously refused and documented. Mr. Marcus, Mrs. Sarah, you should consider yourselves lucky I'm not holding you in contempt of court and charging you with perjury. He banged the gavel. Case dismissed. Robert's will stands as written. Court costs to be paid by the plaintiff. And just like that, it was over. No jury, no deliberation. The judge himself decided right there. I was stunned. I looked at Marcus, hoping for, I don't know what, an apology? Acknowledgement? But he just turned and walked out of the courtroom, Sarah running after him. In the weeks that followed, I tried to process everything. My father had known. He'd known all along what Sarah and Marcus were doing, and he'd taken steps to protect his decision and to protect me. He'd seen my sacrifice, my love, and he'd rewarded me, not just with the house, but with the validation that I'd done the right thing. And Marcus. My brother had betrayed me. Not just by suing me, but by trying to manipulate our father when he was sick and vulnerable. The irony was bitter. He accused me of exactly what he himself was doing. I tried reaching out to Marcus a few times after the trial, but he never responded. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he and Sarah were having marriage problems, that the stress of the trial and the public humiliation had created cracks between them. Part of me felt sorry for him, but most of me was just sad. Sad for the family we lost, for the destroyed relationship, for the greed that corroded something that should have been sacred. Today, I live in the family house. I've kept everything pretty much as it was when my parents were alive. The garden Mom loved, the office where Dad worked, the living room where we watched TV together. Sometimes it hurts to be here, surrounded by memories. But it's also comforting, knowing that I'm honoring their wishes, keeping our family's story alive. As for the money I received, I invested most of it, and donated a significant portion to charities my parents supported. It was never about the money for me. It never was. It was about being there for my father when he needed me, about family, about love. A few months ago, I received a letter. It was from Marcus. Brief. Handwritten. It just said, I'm sorry. I was wrong. You deserved everything Dad left you. I hope someday we can talk again. I haven't responded yet. Not because I don't want to forgive him, but because I still don't know what to say. The wound is still too fresh, the betrayal too deep. But I keep the letter in my desk drawer, and sometimes I read it, and I think that maybe, someday, we can find our way back to each other. Because in the end, that's what our parents would have wanted. They always taught us that family is everything, that love conquers all. And maybe, with time, it can conquer even this. If you made it this far, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. Would you have forgiven your brother? And stay tuned, because every week we have incredible stories of courtroom twists right here on the channel.